Okay, boys and girls, I'm going to read the next chapter or two in Charlotte's Web. So the last reading was last night. I did a chapter last night. That was chapter 3, which I think was our chapter about escape. If you remember, Wilbur decided to escape from the pen. And then when he did that, everybody started to chase him, and it got very confusing. And he ended up being very upset and just wanted to go back in the pen. So in the end, he got back to his pen and got to eat his slops, as they call it, which is all the food they put in the bucket. Here's the picture, if you remember, from yesterday, where poor Wilbur was being chased all over because they wanted him to be back in his pen where he was safe. So, okay, so our next chapter, chapter 4, and here you'll see again, I earmarked the page, which means I'm going to do that. Chapter 4 is called Loneliness. So I wonder if poor Wilbur is feeling lonely. Okay, and again, not every page has pictures, but when it does, I'll be sure to show you those pictures. Okay, are we all set? Okay. It says, the next day was rainy and dark. Rain fell on the roof of the barn and dripped steadily from the eaves. Rain fell in the barnyard and ran in crooked courses down into the lane where the thistles grew. Rain spattered against Mrs. Zuckerman's kitchen windows and came gushing in the downspouts. Rain fell on the backs of the sheep as they grazed in the meadow. When the sheep got tired of standing in the rain, they walked slowly up the lane. Rain upset Wilbur's plans. Wilbur had planned to go out this day and dig a new hole in his yard. He had other plans, too. His plans for the day went something like this. Breakfast at 6:30, skim milk, crusts, middlings, bits of donuts, wheat cakes with drops of maple syrup, potato skins, leftover custard, and a little bit of shredded wheat. Breakfast would finish at 7. From 7 to 8, Wilbur planned to have a little talk with Templeton. He was the rat that lived under his trough. Talking with Templeton was not the most interesting occupation, but it was better than nothing. From 8 to 9, Wilbur planned to take a nap outdoors in the sun. From 9 to 11, he planned to dig a hole or a trench and possibly find something good to eat buried in the dirt. From 11 to 12, he planned to stand still and watch the flies on the boards, watch bees in the clover, and watch swallows in the air. 12 o'clock would be lunchtime, middlings, warm water, apple parings, meat gravy, carrot scraps, and the wrapper off the package of cheese. Lunch would be over at 1. From 1 to 2, he planned to sleep. From 2 to 3, he planned to scratch those itchy places by rubbing against the fence. From 3 to 4, he planned to stand perfectly still and think of what it was like to be alive and to wait for Fern. At 4, supper would come. Wilbur had gone to sleep thinking about all of these plans. He awoke at 6 and saw the rain, and it seemed as though he just couldn't bear it. I get everything all beautifully planned out, and it has to go and rain, he said. For a while he stood gloomily indoors. He had walked to the door and looked out. Drops of rain struck his face. The yard was cold and wet. His trough had an inch of rainwater in it, and Templeton was nowhere to be found. "Are you out there, Templeton?" called Wilbur. But there was no answer. Suddenly, Wilbur felt very lonely and friendless. "One day, just like another," he groaned. "I'm very young, and I have no real friend here in the barn. It's going to rain all morning and all afternoon. Fern won't come when the weather's bad. Oh, honestly." And Wilbur was crying again for the second time in 2 days. He's feeling kind of bad about himself, isn't he? Yeah, maybe he just needs to find something to be thankful for. What do you think? At 6:30, Wilbur heard the banging of the pail. Lurvy was standing outside in the rain, stirring up his breakfast. "Come, pig," said Lurvy. Wilbur did not budge. Lurvy dumped the slops in the pail and walked away. He noticed that something was wrong with the pig. Wilbur didn't want food. He wanted love. He wanted a friend, someone who would play with him. He mentioned this to the goose, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the sheepfold. "Will you come over and play with me?" he asked. Sorry, said the goose. "I'm sitting on my eggs, 8 of them. Have to keep them toasty warm. I have to stay right here. I'm no flibberty-ibberty-gibbet. I do not play when there's eggs to hatch. I'm expecting goslings. Well, I didn't think you were having woodpeckers, said Wilbur bitterly. Wilbur next tried asking one of the lambs. Will you please play with me? He asked. Certainly not, said the lamb. In the first place, I cannot get into your pen, and I'm not old enough to jump over the fence. And in the second place, I'm not interested in pigs. Well, what do you mean? Said Wilbur. Nothing is the limit of nothing. It's the lowest you can go. If there's something wrong, then every little bit of something. Oh, be quiet, said the lamb, and you can go play by yourself. I don't want to play with pigs. Oh. Sadly, Wilbur lay down and listened to the rain. Soon he saw the rat climbing down a slanting board that he used as a stairway. Really quick, boys and girls, remember our rule on the playground? If someone says, can I play with you? The answer is always what? Yes, I know. That would have made Wilbur feel better, wouldn't it? Will you play with me, Templeton? Asked Wilbur. Play, said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. Play? I hardly know the meaning of the word. Well, said Wilbur, it means to have fun and to skip and run and jump and make merry. I never do those things if I can avoid them, said the rat sourly. I prefer to spend my time eating and spying and hiding. I am a glutton, but not a merrymaker. Right now, I'm on my way to your trough to eat your breakfast, since you don't have enough sense to eat it yourself. Sorry, I forgot. Here's the picture of Wilbur talking to the sheep. Templeton's not a very friendly character in this book, you'll soon learn. And Templeton the rat crept along the wall and disappeared into a little tunnel he had dug between the door and the trough in Wilbur's yard. Templeton was a crafty rat, and he had things pretty much his own way. The tunnel was an example of his skill. The tunnel enabled him to get from the barn to his hiding place under the trough without coming out into the open. He had tunnels and runways all over the farm and could get from one place to another without being seen. Usually he slept during the day and came out mostly at night. Wilbur watched him disappear into his tunnel, and in a moment he saw the rat's sharp nose poke out from underneath his trough. Cautiously, Templeton pulled himself over the edge of the trough and looked in. This was almost more than Wilbur could stand. On this dreary rainy day, to see his breakfast being eaten by somebody else. He knew Templeton was getting soaked, but that didn't comfort him. He felt friendless and hungry. He threw himself down on his manure pile and sobbed. Late that afternoon, Lurvy went to see Mr. Zuckerman. I think there's something wrong with that pig of yours. He hasn't touched his food. Well, give him 2 spoonfuls of sulfur and a little molasses, said Mr. Zuckerman. Ugh, Wilbur could not believe what was happening to him when Lurvy caught him and forced that medicine down his throat. This was certainly the worst day of his life. He didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore. Oh, and here's Wilbur crying. I wonder if there's something he could do to cheer himself up. All right, let's see. Darkness settled. Soon there were only shadows and the noises of the sheep chewing their cud, and occasionally the rattle of the cow chain overhead. You can imagine Wilbur's surprise when out of the darkness came a small voice he had never heard before. It sounded rather thin, but pleasant. Do you want a friend, Wilbur? It said. I'll be a friend to you. I've watched you all day, and I like you. But I can't see you, Wilbur said, jumping up to his feet. Where are you, and who are you? I'm right up here, said the voice. Go to sleep, and you'll see me in the morning. Okay, chapter 5 is called Charlotte. Shall we keep going? Okay, let me just check and see how long this chapter is. Oh, it's a long one. All right, we'll see how far we can get. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there's usually something awake. The first time he woke, he heard Templeton gnawing a hole in the grain bin. His teeth scraped loudly. That crazy rat, thought Wilbur. Why does he have to stay up all night? Why can't he sleep like any other decent animal? The second time Wilbur woke, he heard the goose turning on her nest. What time is it? He whispered to the goose. Probably about 11:30, said the goose. Why aren't you asleep? Too many things on my mind. Well, said the goose, that's not my trouble. I have nothing on my mind. I've too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs? No, said Wilbur. I suppose it's uncomfortable. How long does it take for a goose egg to hatch? Approximately 30 days, all told, said the goose, but I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I pull a little straw over the eggs and go out for a walk. Wilbur yawned and went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard the voice again saying, I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep, and you'll see me in the morning. Right before dawn, he woke and listened. The barn was very still. Overhead on the main floor, nothing stirred. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet, waiting for the light. Day's almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared. One by one, the stars went out. Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under her wing. Then he could see the sheep and the lambs. Beautiful day is here at last. Today I'm going to find my friend. Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen. He looked on the window ledge. He stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing. He hated to break the lovely stillness of dawn by using his voice, but he couldn't think of any other way to locate his new friend. So he cleared his throat. Attention, please, he said in a loud, firm voice. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make him or herself known by giving me a sign or signal? Wilbur paused and listened. All the other animals lifted their heads and stared at him. Wilbur blushed, but he was determined to get in touch with his unknown friend. Attention, please, he said. I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me where you are, if you are my friend. The sheep looked at each other in disgust. Stop your nonsense, Wilbur, said the oldest sheep. If you have a new friend here, you are probably disturbing his rest. And the quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody in the morning before they're ready. How can you be sure your friend is an early riser? Oh, I beg everyone's pardon, said Wilbur. I didn't mean to be objectionable. He lay down meekly in the manure facing the door. He did not know it, but his friend was very close by. And the old sheep was right. His friend was still asleep. Lurvy appeared with slops for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out, ate everything in a big hurry, and licked the trough. The sheep moved off down the lane, and the gander waddled along behind them, pulling the grass. Just then, Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, and he heard the voice that had addressed him the last night. Salutations, said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. What? He cried. Salutations, repeated the voice. What are they, and where are you? Said Wilbur. Please tell me where you are, and what are salutations? Salutations are greetings, said the voice. When I say salutations, it's just my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Hey, here I am. Look, I'm waving. At last, Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kindly way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web. And hanging from the top of that web, head down, was a large gray spider. There you go. Can you see it? See Wilbur looking up? Okay. She was about the size of a gumdrop. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. See me now? She asked. Oh, indeed, said Wilbur. Yes, indeed. Oh, how are you? Good morning. Salutations. So pleased to meet you. What is your name? May I please have your name? My name, said the spider, is Charlotte. Charlotte what? Asked Wilbur eagerly. Charlotte A. Cavatica, but you can just call me Charlotte. Ugh, I think you're beautiful, said Wilbur. Well, I am pretty, said Charlotte. There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me. Well, why can't you? He said. I'm right here. Yes, but I'm nearsighted, said Charlotte. I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways, but not so good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly. So nearsighted means she can't see things that are far away, but can see things that are up close. So she has a hard time seeing Wilbur because he's farther away. The fly that had been crawling around Wilbur's trough had flown into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was tangled in all the sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings, trying to break free. First, said Charlotte, I dive at him. She plunged head first toward the spider, and she dropped a tiny silken thread. Next, I wrap him up, she said. She grabbed the fly and threw some silk jets around it and rolled it over and over, wrapping it up so it couldn't move. Wilbur watched. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he didn't like flies, he suddenly felt sorry for this one. There, said Charlotte, now I'll knock him out so he'll be more comfortable. So then she bit the fly. He can't feel a thing now, she said. He'll make a perfect breakfast for me. Can you see? There we go. Wrapping up that fly. You mean you eat flies? Gasped Wilbur. Certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, beetles, moths, butterflies, cockroaches, gnats, midges, daddy-long-legs, centipedes, mosquitoes, anything that's careless enough to get caught in my web. Well, I have to live, don't I? Well, of course, said Wilbur. Do they taste good? Ugh, delicious. Of course, I don't really eat them. I drink their blood, said Charlotte. I love it. Her voice grew thinner and more pleasant. Oh, don't say that, groaned Wilbur. Please don't say things like that. Well, why not? It's true, and I have to say what is true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but that's the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me, and her mother was a trapper before her. All our family have been trappers, way back for thousands and thousands of years. We spiders have been laying for flies and bugs. That's not a very good inheritance, said Wilbur. He was sad because his new friend liked to drink blood. Oh, it is, said Charlotte, but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this fancy idea, but it is what it is. It's cruel, said Wilbur. Well, you can't talk, said Charlotte. You have your meals brought in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get by on my own. I live by my wits. I have to be clever and sharp, or I'm going to be hungry. I have to think it out. And furthermore, do you realize if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, the bugs would increase and multiply, and they could be all over the earth and wipe things out? Really? Said Wilbur. Well, I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web is a good thing after all. The goose had been listening to this conversation, and she was chuckling to herself. There are a lot of things Wilbur doesn't know about life, she said. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea what Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to do. The goose raised herself a bit and poked her eggs a little further under her so they would receive the full heat from her body. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from all the excitement of meeting someone new for the first time. A breeze brought him the smell of clover. The sweet smell was beyond the fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend, all right. But what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte is fierce and scheming and bloodthirsty, everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her, even though she is pretty and, of course, so clever? Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he was to discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her bold exterior, she had a very kind heart, and she was to prove to be loyal and true to the very end. All right, boys and girls, we're going to stop there. So our next chapter will be chapter 6, and that one's going to be called Summer Days. All right, have a good day, everybody.